Welcome to Three Thoughts On. Thank you, everyone that's watching online, and thank you all that you're here live with us. Greatly appreciate it. This is our first podcast of the year, and I couldn't be happier for the guest that I am honored to have here, Jacobo Hincapi Echeverri. How are you today?
Good, very good. And you?
Doing well, thank you. First off, always thanking Nona Media and Lake Nona and Juan Santos and Reese for allowing us to do this the way that we do it and give us the freedom to be able to use the space and the equipment to be able to do this and share it with you. Today we're going to have a conversation of a very important topic regarding health. We're going to touch on a number of different things from aging, cancer, gut biome, and a few more. But before we get into that, I'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and share with the folks online and here, who are you and how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Well, it's a long story. First of all, thank you for having me, Rafael. This is an honor for me to be here. So who I am? So my name is Jacobo Hincapi, or Jacob Hincapi, as people in the United States they know me better. So I am a physician. I was graduated from the University of Caldas in Manizales, Colombia. Then I inspired by my attending physicians there, role models that they became that kind of physician that you want to be in the future. So one day I wanted to be an internist. So after years passed, I was a cruise ship physician for many years, then studied for the boards in the United States, and I managed to be accepted into the residency in internal medicine in New York. Then I became a geriatrician at Harvard Medical School. Then I did palliative care, and finally my goal in life was to close that circle, because as much as I was studying and learning about aging and about how the process for you to age, I realized that the circle would be completed as long as I would be an oncologist. So then I was an attending and I was a professor of medicine for several years at the University of Florida. I was a researcher in microbiota, in aging, and so on. And then the opportunity to become an oncologist was passing by in front of my life, and I took it. I became an oncologist, and currently I am a GI oncology specialist and geriatric oncology specialist here in Orlando. And that's who I am in a lot of, too long time, but just, trying to make it in a few words.
That's a lot of studying, a lot of classes.
Tell me about it.
That is interesting. I can appreciate your journey because you mentioned palliative care, right?
Yes.
Palliative care, taking care of people that are at their last stage of life.
Correct.
I mean, you and I have discussed, my mother passed away a couple of years ago of cancer, and we had to go through that process, and you learn a lot about the human condition when a human is getting to that stage in their lives, and you just basically have to wait, right? So I'm sure that had an impact on you and then trying to then bridge that circle or complete that circle.
Absolutely. And Rafael, even though I've been practicing this for several years, still, every single day when I have to deliver the news to somebody, it's a hit on you, right? And then you never learn completely. Every single day you keep on learning and you keep on being affected by the sufferment of the humanity. And one of the examples was, for example, in December 25th, I have to say bye to a dear patient of mine. He was only 23 years old, 23. And you realize like nobody should die at that age, right? But regardless, so you have to continue. Yeah.
No, I can sympathize with that. Let's just take that as a starting point for our conversation, because I want to touch on all these points. Let's start with aging.
Yes.
Can you help us define, based on what modern science does today, what is aging and why do we age?
Wow, what a question. So aging, the definition as we get it in from the books or from the official sources, is an irreversible process where all the cells in your organism starts to decline in terms of the function And the cells, they have either three options. One, which is dividing. Another one, which is senescence, which in other words means getting old and losing the function. And third, a cell that is not dividing or is dividing in an abnormal way, which means cancer, right? But nowadays, with the new development of the modern era of medicine, aging is changing, and the definition is changing as well. So I remember when I was a child or when I was a teenager, for me, somebody in the 60s was already an old person, right? But now, 60s is the new 40s. People, as long as the time goes by, they are living longer and longer and longer. But very important, a differentiation in two concepts here. What is lifespan and what is health span? Lifespan is basically how long you're going to live. But health span is how long you're going to be in good shape, in good conditions, and how long you're going to stay sick before you pass away, right? And this is the first concept that I have in my mind and that I mention to my students and during all my conferences. I would like to die younger, very young, but the latest possible. That's pretty much like summarizing everything that I just mentioned there. So going back into the current definition of aging, so the first question that I ask myself, is it true that you are going to be able to go back in age and make yourself younger? Or is just a matter to slow down the process of aging? Time is going to tell us, because studies in regards of aging in humans, they are quite difficult to do. You would need maybe 80 years and make a cohort of people like these people were intervened with this and this and this and this kind of supplements or these kind of interventions versus other people who didn't do anything in particular, but that takes time. So the closest that we have for that kind of studies is mice. When I was at the University of Florida, we were able to treat, or deal with a lot of mice and rats because the lifespan for them is about like 3 years. But in terms of the genetics, we are only different in about like 3% of our genetics. At the end of the day, the biology of the mammals is the same, right? So again, the definition of aging at this point is changing, certainly, because probably in the future, we are going to be able to go back in the process of aging, or at least slowing down in a remarkable way.
And it seems like the research is converging, right? You have people like David Sinclair, who's done a lot of work, first with yeast and then with mice, but then we're still missing that last piece, right? Which is with humans, like you said, it's very complicated,
right?
Because you need a large sample, you need a long time, and that creates a little bit of a time roadblock to be able to start seeing those results. And one thing that makes me happy is that at least in the last 20 years, when you've seen some of the research that these folks are doing, some of the stuff that you're doing, it seems to have started this way, but it's starting to converge. Absolutely. More people are starting to agree with this definition of aging, which is basically worrying about function. Mm-hmm. Right, worrying about not necessarily the number of years, but the number of years where I can be active. And I think we can all see that a little bit. I mean, I see it in myself. I'm 53, and I remember when my parents...
You don't look like, by the way.
I'm a little lucky there on that. But I remember when my parents were my age.
Yes.
And, nothing wrong with them, but that they were already done. They weren't very active, and they weren't looking to be active because the mentality was like, I'm retiring soon and this is it.
Right.
And I'm just succumbing to the process and I'm just waiting for when death is going to come and get me. And I'm happy to see that, through the work that people like you and many others are doing, we're starting to see that difference between health and lifespan. So, given that, you mentioned the new changing and evolving definition of aging, You also mentioned these three things that our body cells can do, right? Which is, split, right? Become senescent, or the zombie cells, as they call them too, senescent cells or zombie cells. And then replicate in an inappropriate way,
Yes.
right? Which is what we call cancer. Let's talk about that for a moment, because you hear people talk about we should find a cure for cancer.
Yes.
And there's a lot of conversations and conspiracies. And you know me, I'm not a conspiracist. I like hard facts, hard science. And I know that science is a process, and that science is the only thing that I know that continues to question itself. And that's why we progress. It's a process, not a destination. So what do you say to people when we talk about cancer, and how do we, quote unquote, cure it?
Let's just start by the definition of cancer. So cancer is the abnormal division of cells. Therefore, cancer is a genetic disease, but not necessarily that is inheritable. So not necessarily that you're condemned to have cancer just because somebody in your family had cancer before, but definitely it's a genetic disease. Why? Because for any cell to divide in an abnormal way, something has to happen within the nuclei, within the DNA of that particular cell to produce something abnormal. Now, speaking about cancer, there is no cancer. There are cancers with a huge S at the end. Why cancers? First of all, the cancer is produced by different tissues. It's produced in different situations, by different causes. And at the same time, when you get a tissue, for example, from breast cancer, you cannot compare two different tumors, even though they are breast cancer, because they express different proteins or different molecules in the surface of the cell. Therefore, the cancer is not a cancer, it's what type of cancer are you talking about? If we are looking for a possible cure, which, by the way, nowadays, in the 21st century, is the best time ever in history that any person with the disease can achieve a cure. The current research that we have every single day is fantastic. And what is happening today in terms of the overall survival or the progression-free survival, which means how long does the patient live with the disease without the next progression of the disease, is absolutely outrageous. So the research that has been published within the last 3 or 4 years, if you are going to be able to read it all, you will need 100 years to be able to read every single article that is coming up within this little time frame, So these patients nowadays, I am happy to say that I have many patients that they've been cured of the disease, and I have to say that I was part of that by delivering science to them.